Guys, welcome to episode 18 of the ATF podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today is going to be a very special interview indeed. It's the first in a series of remote interviews after having over 130 requests for people to join the show. If you are waiting to come onto the show, please bear with me. There's a lot of work involved and emails back and forth, and obviously being limited to dates and when I can get on and they can get on, but bear with me. We will get to you at some point. So today I'm bringing you Ignacio Esteban. He's a retired ATF agent and author of over 80 books. I will, of course, put all the links to his stuff in the description and the show notes if you're listening on one of the podcast platform apps. And yeah, I know this man's a wealth of knowledge and he's lived some life somewhat short of a movie.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Marty. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. It seems like this is a great opportunity, and I'm happy for you to have all the success having all those potential new guests on the show. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a very busy year for me.
Good.
I was at a point when I was struggling to get people into the studio to come on, and then did a little bit of research, found the podcast guest platform, and they featured me in the newsletter. And yeah, here we are. So you're the first one. Looking forward to this today. So thank you for requesting to come on.
Yeah, man. And I've been doing these shows now. I think I've done over in 2.5 years. I think close to over 200 plus. Easy.
Oh, wow.
200 plus around the world. Like second or third from the UK. Few I've done from Australia, Canada, and of course I've done one from India. That was more of an interview, written questions, and of course all over America.
Wow.
That's cool.
Okay, so it's just in true podcast fashion, what I normally do is try and get a little bit of a backstory before we get into the meat and potatoes. Could you give a little bit of a background of sort of where you grew up, how it all began, and what inspired you into law enforcement?
Yeah. I was born in Los Angeles, LA, raised in Miami, right? My grandparents were Spanish. My grandparents were grandparents, but they came to Cuba. And because of Castro and the Communist Revolution and all the problems there, they had to leave. Everything was nationalized. You know, with the communists, they took everything. And they came to the U.S. My parents in the early 60s. America was a great country. A lot of people came with political asylum. It was pretty much a brain drain of knowledge professionals in the early 60s that came from Cuba, mostly Spanish, other groups also, but came to the United States. And fortunate enough that I was raised in Miami. Lots of Cubans in Miami, right? That's why I'm bilingual. I speak Spanish also because cool. It's like you also take it in school too. So it's, obviously English is my first language. And I spoke with my grandparents because they didn't speak much English either. They came a lot later. It's tough for people sometimes to learn a different language when they're older. So I spoke a lot of Spanish with them. You have it in the community there. And I started, in Miami. And one show I watched growing up, which kind of influenced me a little bit, but never thought I'd really go into law enforcement, to be honest with you. I didn't think I was going to, was Miami Vice. Miami Vice, I remember Miami Vice in the 80s was really popular. And being from Miami, I mean, you have Don Johnson there, the long hair, the beard, the cool Ferrari, right? Undercover, right? Cool weapons, flash, and all that. And I think, man, that is pretty cool. And then another thing is, I'm also in that area, so I'm seeing all the locations they're filming at. You see what's going on. But I put it back in my head and said, that's pretty cool. But man, will I ever be part of that? I don't know. I don't think so. And so it goes back in my head and then off it goes because, of course, when I did Undercover, I didn't look like this and I didn't sound like this. I had a big beard. I myself had really long hair back in my back. My English was broken and no muy bien. And I'll bring that in almost like a Scarface type, Tony Montana type mentality out there
to act as well.
Yeah, you can't let those guys think that you have like almost a master's degree and working on this. I think, man, this guy's way too sharply out here. You got to be a guy that came off the boat in 10 years and now you're hustling to make some money and maybe working for the cartels. And that's the kind of story I would tell. So, but before I get to that, I said, so I almost actually, you see the poster behind me, ATF Undercover. That's the name of my autobiography. I almost called the book The Accidental Agent because I actually was going to go to, this is back in the mid 90s. I graduated from college with a bachelor's in political science and history, and I was studying at FIU, which is in Miami, Florida International University, on a master in international relations. I accepted to go to law school, but it's going to be in Lansing, Michigan. And those who know the United States, Miami and Michigan are very far, and Michigan is very cold.
Yeah. Polar opposites.
Polar worlds, right? Complete
Yeah.
different. But it's nice to have that option. But I didn't have a scholarship because in college I had a tennis scholarship. I play a lot of tennis, so that helped me there. But this would have to pay. And back then, even in the mid '90s, school was about 25, 30,000 a year per semester, right? Per year. So that's still $100,000 to get there, get a loan, everything else. I said, well, let me see. There's this thing that came out in the mid '90s. I'm maybe a little older than you, Marty. That was called Windows 95, right?
Oh
And the
yeah.
internet started coming out and dial up and all that. And people were like, what is this thing? You hear the beep, right? And you
Yeah.
can't use your phone and all that. And people, what's this internet thing? I said, man, I was researching for work and information, travel, and everything else. And people said, this is going to be the future. People said, no way, no way. People are going to be on that for hours. People want to be outside. Who wants to be inside, cooped up with that thing? And I
Yeah.
said, no, you'd be surprised. You're going to be surprised. I had a Prodigy email and I used to use a search engine, AOL. Remember AOL? Those were the
Yeah.
big ones before
American
Google.
Online.
Those were the big names back in the 90s. So things will obviously change and Google will take over all that stuff here. But I started looking for work. And a lot of people didn't know that federal jobs, government jobs were available online. And it was the easiest way. Instead of going through the paper and try to find work, which was kind of impossible, you had it right there in your tip of your fingerprints, all this kind of work. So I put in for customs because I was a very athletic guy. My father was a gun enthusiast. I knew how to shoot early when I was younger, right? And Florida, but if you don't know, it's a very, very pro gun state. I mean, there's a lots of firearms. It's part of growing up. It's for self defense, and you shoot to train and everything. Very proficient. I know very different out there than UK, and I'll talk a little bit about gun laws and how the blue state, red state mentality plays out, and especially being an ATF agent, how that works out. But and where I grew up, it was a very pro red gun state. So that's okay. So I'm professional with guns. I'm athletic because academies are tough. You got to be fit. You got to work out. You got to run. And a lot of people get washed out. So I had that going for me. I said, I think I can do this. And I speak Spanish. And 90% of the flights coming into Miami, which is MIA, were from Latin America. So you want people to be able to communicate with those who are coming in to catch the smugglers and everything. Instead of getting a translator, which is sometimes tougher to do that. So I put in for the job. And about 6 months later, I got the job. So I
Wow.
went from almost going to law school to now making good money because with customs, I don't know how it's in UK, but I know I met some guys before out of Britain. It has a lot of good overtime, a lot of good benefits.
Yeah,
So I
definitely.
would have a lot of healthcare benefits. I would have retirement pension and everything else with federal law enforcement. So that was it, man. This is pretty good. I had a degree, and now I go right into the front line, the war on drugs. Really different.
Wow. And
Front
especially
line.
in Miami as well, in that
Miami in the
era.
90s.
Yeah.
Miami in the 90s, frontline, the war on drugs. Eye opening, waking up. Not just with the amount of drugs coming in. That I expected because it's Miami and that's where they were going. At the time, the cartels in Colombia were thriving. Now, the Mexicans would take over later, right? But the Cali and the Medellin cartels were thriving at that time. And the
Pablo
fastest
Escobar.
way to get drugs from Colombia into the United States was through airplanes, right? And they would get them in there, right? 747s, because they would get a lot of flowers. Imagine this: 747 full of flowers, right? A lot of drugs coming in. And one thing I really didn't expect was the amount of corruption.
Yes, I've heard this. Yeah.
Lots of corruption, not only among the ramp workers, not only among the longshoremen, but among our own ranks, among
Wow.
our own ranks. And it kind of opened my eyes up a lot when I was working there for about, again, I'm a guy in my early 20s at the time, mid 90s, early 20s. I'm throwing this very dedicated, hardworking guy. I had one thing you got to have, especially when you go into this kind of business, you have a good moral compass, Marty. You got to have a
Hmm.
good moral compass because guys who don't, they kind of fall because there's a lot of money, a lot of access, a lot of drugs. And if you think you can play both sides, my freedom to me meant too much to me. And I didn't want to tarnish my family's name or my own name, right? And,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to spend 10, 15 years incarcerated. That's for sure. But some guys get greedy. And one of our supervisors, he fell down that path. He fell down
Wow.
that path. And, it's one thing when you talk to him, next thing you see him getting arrested, and he was arrested by internal affairs from within customs, an investigation where you had MIA, Miami International Airport, and then nearby you had a smaller airport. For those who know the area, it's Tamiami Regional Airport, where smaller planes would come in to be cleared. Well, he would come on the weekends, clear those flights with local police from Hollandale and Hollywood Police Department to help him clear 300 pounds of cocaine.
Wow.
They were coming in from Colombia, 300 pounds of cocaine or wherever else, clear the flight illegally, obviously. That's trafficking, smuggling, and then escorted with police escort to a warehouse.
Wow.
Wow. That's one of my supervisors.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
What happened to
Unbelievable.
him?
Yeah, he gets hammered. He gets hit hard, but then I think he cooperates and all that's out there. And then I see other people who I knew who work on the same teams, and they're getting popped, right? They're getting arrested, and it's an impression when you're working and you're seeing them escorted by IA, Internal Affairs, in the concourse, international concourse. They got their leg irons on. They're being handcuffed in the front. They got the belly chains on, and they're wobbling around like this, right? Handcuffed, and you're thinking, man, I used to work with that guy. Now he's looking at a shitload of time, and you're like, man, don't want to be doing that again.
Wow.
It catches your
So
attention.
I guess you kind of lost faith in the job role that you were doing with the people surrounding you.
Some people, you just got to make sure that you're careful. Watch your back. Watch your back. Keep it clean. I'm proud. I did my job. I did by the book. I did things right because I didn't want to be that guy that they made an example of. Right. So I learned that early. So you make a lot of contacts because customs. I mean, it's not only seizing a lot of drugs coming in, but you seize guns going out. Remember, the cartels bring the drugs in. They want the money also to come out, right? So a lot of money comes out, and we had a lot of different operations to seize all that. But that's when you also, unfortunately, a lot of corruptions. You also have counterfeit currency coming into the country. You also have counterfeit credit cards. I mean, you can only imagine the kind of stuff that we see coming in. So I network a lot. So, but with border authority and customs, I don't need a search warrant. I don't need probable cause. Everybody's subject to search that comes in internationally, right?
Yeah.
The product comes in, the merchandise, humans, just everybody gets searched if need be. Not everybody has to be searched, but if you got intelligence or you suspect something, you develop pretty good suspicion. One thing that I thought was really sad, you see a lot, is to see the human mules that swallow the pellets.
Yeah.
Full of cocaine and heroin,
Yep.
right? And they have their stuff. And I feel bad because some of these people were very poor peasants or people who are doing it for desperate means, and they kind of get used by these organizations. It's pretty much if you do it or your family's going to suffer badly, and it's dangerous because they leak, they die. Sometimes they're playing you say, hey, we got another one, DOA, dead on arrival, right?
Wow.
Yeah, it's awful, awful. And if you can't pass it fast enough, let's say we don't catch everybody. I have to admit. I mean, it will be sometimes planes full of these mules, right? Full of them. Maybe we catch 10%, 15%, right? And then they make it, and you can tell they go to some of these, cheesy hotels near downtown Miami where they got to pass it quickly and then they get paid. But what happens if they can't pass it? Because I've been at the hospitals when you catch them, you got to give them this laxative. They got to it takes days for them to pass it. So if they can't pass it fast enough, what do you think these guys are going to do? You think they're going to wait for days? This is business, right? This is money. No, they're going to kill him. And gut him.
And take it out of him.
Take it out.
Oof.
Gut him.
Wow.
Gut him. They no, these guys, this is a ruthless business, man. Ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
These guys have no soul, no conscience. They don't care. It's kill or be killed. It's their mentality. Absolutely ruthless people. So that's what I was watching firsthand. Interesting looking there. So I networked a lot, and I want to make my cases bigger, Marty. I want to be able to not just work at the airport or within the area. I want to be an agent. I want to be a full-time agent where I can go wherever necessary. It's going to be a little bit harder. You have to develop probable cause, and then you may have to take it from a jury beyond a reasonable doubt and make your cases and work. But I felt like it's a better challenge where I can do better cases. So I had networked with ATF, DEA, FBI, Secret Service, and I put in, and ATF was the first one to pick me up. So in 2000, after 5 years with Customs, I go, and I'm fortunate enough, at least they didn't send me to Puerto Rico. They didn't send me to some southwest border, which can be, really difficult and challenging to be out there to live in those conditions. I got Tampa, which was good. I stayed in Florida. I wasn't in Miami, but I went to school up in Tampa at San Luis University, so I knew the area somewhat, and I was able to start working in there. So that was good. How did I get into undercover work? Well, I was fortunate enough that the group I was working with did a lot of undercover work because it's not for everybody. You have to really learn it because you can get yourself hurt and killed pretty easily if you don't know what you're doing. So one thing I did is I studied it a lot. I had mentors that worked on it. And one of the guys I worked with, Carlos, we call him the Puerto Rican bullet catcher. Listen
Wow.
to that, the Puerto Rican bullet catcher. Why do we call him the Puerto Rican bullet catcher? Well, I'll tell you a quick story here. In 1987, he was involved in a shooting, and this is in Hialeah, which is in Dade County. If you know the location there, in the Westland Mall in Hialeah, and they're arresting a really bad guy. And the guy's in the car, like here. Carlos is right here on his car. He comes out, and the SWAT team is in the back over here, right? And he has a 6-hour 9mm, and the bad guy happens to have a 6-hour 9mm, the same gun, right? So they come out to arrest the guy. He's a bad dude. He's a career criminal. They have a warrant for his arrest, and he pulls out, and the bad guy shoots at him, and he puts his gun out, and the bullet goes right through the muzzle and plugs his barrel.
Oof. Wow.
Look where the gun's at.
Wow.
Imagine where would that go in his face, right?
Yeah.
That's not good, man. So the SWAT team then opens up and takes care of that guy in the back. Fortunate enough that he had those team there. But I always told him, man, that's your birthday, man. That's the day that you were born. That day, it's like the Matrix, man. You're bullet catcher there. Can't do that once.
Yeah.
Can't do that again. That's he retired later, and he did a show with Ripley's Believe It or Not. He did a show with Ripley's Believe It or Not later,
Wow.
and some other locals newscasts about that story. And I think he still has the weapon, and he keeps it. And and he was a big karate guy too. He was like a 10th degree black belt and everything else. So I learned a lot from Carlos. I learned a lot how to do undercover work. I developed my own style. His English was broken because he's from Puerto Rico. So I kind of used my own style. And some people like to talk a lot. I was like in the middle. I would talk, but remember, the jury wants to also listen to them talk and what they're going to do, what they have done. So I wanted to make sure I painted a good picture for the jury. And that was important for me. And so I always try to have everything like almost like a movie, audio and video, so you can see the guy and everything else. So I want the jury, when they have to deliberate, to make them to feel good about their decision. I don't want them not to be. So that's why my undercover work, I had a 100% conviction rate on that. Now I also did ATF. It's a lot smaller for your audience. What's ATF? Well, ATF is alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. It used to be part of the Department of Treasury, but after 9/11, it went over to Justice Department. And that's why I spend most of my career work for DOJ, for the Department of Justice. And it's a smaller agency than the FBI and DEA. I mean, I think we have maybe a little less than 3,000 agents, right? We have about 5,000 employees overall, because we had inspectors, they call them back then, IOIs, they call them now, and other admin people. So FBI and DEA a lot bigger. So we had to do a lot more with less. So I was also the case agent. I was the undercover. I did my own workups. I did my own property. It's taxing. Other agencies, they can delegate a lot. Not so fortunate.
Now, when you're going into these undercover operations, do you have to have your own backstory and memorize everything? And
You have to have a good story. You gotta have everything comes with it, the identification, everything else that you need to match up who you are and who you're saying you are, in case you get called out on something. And I did that, and I talked about it in my book. And there's some. I mean, I dealt with repeat violent offenders. I dealt with gang members. I dealt with international traffickers, domestic traffickers. I dealt with armed home invaders, murder for hire cases. So a nice variety of cases. That's what ATF does. So ATF is it's a joke I made up, but it used to be the days of Elliot Ness, Bureau of Prohibition. He's a legacy ATF agent. It used to be then Big A, but after alcohol was legalized, alcohol became a small A, small T for tobacco. Tobacco diversion, not a lot of big cases on that. There is some issues going on, but you don't get a lot of time. Okay, seizures, huge F for firearms, and a medium E for explosives. So the guns is where it's at. That's where we have major problems, lots of violence. What we call the trigger pullers, the guys involved in homicides, robberies, burglary, you name it. Those are the kind of guys we want. And those are the kind of guys I did a lot of cases with too. So that was interesting. I'll tell you a few interesting stories there. One of the cases I dealt with was this guy, we call it Chino. My last name was Blanco. And this is about maybe 2009, 2010. The exact date, it's in my book, in up near Tampa area, because I worked there for 12 years. In Tampa. Then after that, I would come to Miami. I would work in Miami for about 7 years. And then I would promote and go ATF headquarters, where I would see it up in DC. because I'm here now in Virginia, and I retired 2 years ago, and I will see behind the scenes how things would work. And I worked with number one command in the Central Division, who later became number two in command for ATF later. So that was fascinating too, how things work
Yeah.
behind the scenes and doing major briefings and everything else. So I found that interesting. But this guy Blanco, he was an interesting character. He was involved, and I'm going to give me a little backstory on him. 1980, he was involved in a shootout with police in the city of Miami. He was in the passenger seat, and he was with an accomplice in the driver's seat. And in a high-speed pursuit, they suspected he was a bolo. Be on the lookout. He matched for a description for possibly being involved with having a load of drugs inside the car. But unfortunately, the officers who were chasing him, they had hit the brakes, and the doors had opened up, and they had fallen out of the cars. He had positioned the car a certain way. That way, his partner could open up and shoot at him. Fortunate enough, he didn't kill him, right? But later they were captured and charged with attempted murder on Leo, law enforcement officers. So my opinion, my guy should have got Chino. I'm gonna call him Chino because that's the name he introduced himself to me as. He should have. He had about 30 years, maybe a little less, maybe about 27 in the state. He should have been life, because then he gets out later in about 2010 or so, right? So he gets out, a guy who's had a horrific history. He's been doing armed burglaries, robberies. He's been involved in everything you can imagine. Attempted murder on Leos. Should never been out. He's out. So now I go back to 2010. I get a call about Sunday night, and this guy I've been dealing with, his name, I call him Small Block. His name is in the book. I have bought guns from him. He has good criminal history. I've been buying guns and drugs from him. He said, "Hey, listen, we got these guns that are stolen. And I got this guy Chino that wants to talk to you about it." So this is about Sunday. So being undercover, I mean, it could be a Sunday night. You still got to take your phone calls. You still got working. You think it's not a 9 to 5 job. Oh, good, I'm done. I get to relax. No, you got undercover phone, man. Those things blow up all the time, and you got issues with your informants that never stop. You have your own personal family issues. You have issues with informants you got to deal with, and then you got issues with the bad guys you got to deal with.
Yeah. So you're fully immersed in that world, and
it's a busy day, man. A busy day, busy weeks, and you get used to it. Maybe that's why I just got busy doing books and everything else. I wanted to keep busy. I don't know. having two teenage daughters also keeps me busy too.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I've got a teenage boy myself.
That's as challenging as dealing with some bad guys, I tell you.
Yeah. You could probably write a book on that.
Yeah, I need to. Not one, but two.
Did you ever have any dangerous moments where you nearly got?
So I'll finish this story, and then we'll go with this because it's pretty interesting. So, all right. So he told me he had more guns. I said, okay. So he passed the phone to me, and I started talking to him in Spanish, and I could tell by his accent he was Cuban, and he said these guns were hot. And I said, what kind of guns? So I started talking about what kind of calibers. He told me the calibers he had. I said, man, this guy has a lot of different guns. We negotiated prices, but in the real world, I just can't just say, okay, let's go now and get it, because I need a team to help me out. I have to do an operational plan. I got to plan stuff out. I got to set up the apartment, because I had an undercover apartment that I used that was fully wired up. So I was going to have them meet me out there in the Pasco area, Pasco County. So I had to buy time. So I got to buy a couple days, get everything approved, get all my ducks in a row. And when everything's set, then I call him back and say, okay, let's do it here. The other guy, Small Block, he knew where the location was. Hey, bring him over. And we can do it. And we agreed to the price. Everything's set. So they come in. They both show up in different cars, and one of them has a red truck. I remember having in the book, what was it? But they have it in a dresser, and it said Dolly. I said, "What's with the dresser?" He said, "Oh, all the guns are inside the dresser." I said, "Really?"
Wow.
Right. Well, bring it in, man. That's the apartment all set up there, and they had the plates to the dresser. They had taken the drawers out, so they glued them on. So if they say the police stopped them, they won't think anything of it. You guys are creative. So, okay, they had the tools, crowbars. They popped out the plates up there, and they start pulling all the guns out. All 16 of them were out there, and they start showing them and have all the video up there. And remember, he's a career criminal, and he's grabbing all the guns, and he has them in his hands in possession and everything else. You can't be doing that. So he's not only that. So he says to me the backstory, what happened. He said, well, yeah, I mean, we have this company we work for, which is a window company. So always be careful. This is a lesson I learned. We had a legitimate company, but on the side, they see houses they thought were vacant or no one's home. Well, it's a legitimate company. Neighbors would think, oh, they just work on the windows. They go on the back side, pop the windows, go in there and clean house, right? Because it's jewelry and everything else. But unfortunately, this house, it was very connected with the sheriff's office. He was the veterinarian for the sheriff that worked on their horses. So Yeah, the big mistake they made on that one. So I said, okay. They talked about the whole thing. Fantastic. I paid him what they owed. And he said, all right, let me take the dresser back. They took the dresser back. They left me all the guns. And I said, I wonder when they come back and they're going to talk about, he's actually going to talk about the shooting with the city of Miami back in the 80s. Well, sure he does. He gives me a little background about himself. And he said, man, he gives me the whole story. He said, man, they couldn't kill me. They couldn't do this. I lit them up. And he starts bragging all the stuff he did. And I was like, man, keep on talking. That's pretty good. It's being recorded. So that's awesome. And I said, okay, very good. He said, listen, I got some AK-47s I can get you next time. I'm going to ask you with this. And I said, okay, man, that's good. I said, I like this area better than Tampa. Tampa is way too hot. I can do a lot more business here after all the stuff we do. We're always cleaning house. I said, excellent. So after they left, I said, okay, we're going to start organizing and taking these guys down. And about a few weeks later, they were arrested, all these guys, right? And he ended up getting 30 years. 30 years.
Wow.
A guy, and he was in his 50s. In his 50s, and ends up getting 30 years. He had to do first estate time. So in essence, a guy like that, it's a life sentence for him. And that felt really good, really satisfying,
Yeah.
putting someone like that away.
Because you know that these weapons are going to be used for gangs and organized crime more than likely,
Oh,
and
yeah.
people are going to get killed with them.
Kill them, and plus, you're going in there in a company, you're supposed to be working, doing a legit job, and on the side, you're stealing from people. I mean,
Yeah.
that's his guns, his collection, right, of weapons. And you go in there and as a criminal stealing, he hasn't learned. He said some people maybe get rehabilitated. This guy could never be rehabilitated. These kind of guys that get out and they're thinking, hey man, how can I do my next lick, my next robbery? What else can I do? And they don't think about improving their lives or learning. No, he had a good job, but he was using it for the wrong reasons, and that's wrong. And I felt good about that case, really good.
Yeah. Save some lives there for sure.
No, absolutely. And brought the guns back to the owner, and he was very appreciative to get the guns back instead of being in the streets. And you're right, they're going in the wrong hands.
Would you say it's very dangerous, the work that you was doing?
Yeah, man.
Like on the verge of being exposed and
yeah,
all the
not
time.
it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. You got to be all in. And that, like I said, the look I had, the beard, and you have to be committed. It's a lot of long hours, and you deal with all different kinds of characters. All different kinds of characters. I dealt with other interesting case, and I have it on my book there, ATF Undercover. That guy's one here, and I would work this one case from A to Z. This one was back in the Tampa area, 2010, 2011 time. I have it in my book where I start. And it's always important to have good informants. You have good informants, they can make or break your cases. You have some bad informants, of course, they can destroy you and really get you jammed up with your cases. And that's why I like to undercover work. The second I got a good introduction to a case or to what I'm doing, I try to cut them out. So it's just me and him. So everything's recorded. We know what's going on. These guys are predisposed. This is what they're actively involved in. Nothing's worse when you have an informant that's, and sometimes I may have to bring them in to find out, hey, make sure everything's okay. Just talk to him. Make sure everything's okay with me. He doesn't suspect anything, right? He doesn't think maybe I'm a I'm a Fed or a cop or something. So it's always good to keep that there open. So with this case, I had an informant cooperator who then introduced me to a guy that had been popped for selling. He was a FedEx employee, right, running guns to Puerto Rico out of Tampa.
Wow.
He was convicted in Puerto Rico, right, pending sentencing. He had pled guilty. He had returned back to Florida, right, and he's already a convicted felon, so he can't have weapons. But he was introduced to me already, and he was going to different gun shows, buying guns because they didn't have background checks, right, at the gun shows, loopholes,
Yeah,
right?
I believe so, yeah.
And he was selling guns to me. So the guy doesn't learn his lesson. He's convicted felon, right? He works for FedEx. He sells guns in Puerto Rico, right? Trafficking guns. That's a big hub over there because there's a lot of violence in Puerto Rico also. And he's himself backwards Puerto Rican. And then he sells me a lot of guns. We popped him, and then I think I ended up seizing. He sold me a Tommy gun with a 75 round drum,
Wow.
FN pistol, Fabrique Nationale, 5.7 millimeter, which is considered the cop killer for weapons.
Wow.
Right, it's supposed to go through body armor. So I've taken a cachet away.
The bigger rounds as well.
Yeah. I've taken a cachet of weapons from this guy here, convicted, and they don't care whatever.
And he doesn't know that you're.
He had no idea. No one ever has an idea about me until afterwards. I introduce myself, and this is the gig, and this is what's going on. And he ends up getting, like I said, you don't get a lot of time, unfortunately, for firearms trafficking, but he got about 3 to 5 years because he had already had one other conviction. I get introduced to him through someone else. and another guy is a high school teacher, right? He's a high school teacher up in that area of Central Florida, and he's also trafficking guns, repeatedly buying and selling guns. Teacher by day, gun trafficker in the afternoon. Does what he can, and I get quite a few guns at him. At one time, when we arrest him, I had he just buys. He would call me and say, "Listen, I'm at the gun show. What are you looking for?" Gun collectors
Wow.
collect. They like their guns. I like to collect guns. Traffickers are flipping guns for profit, right? They need to make
Yeah.
money. Buy
And
and
so
sell,
let's
buy and
so
sell.
so if somebody, if he purchases weapons from the gun show and then sells it to a criminal and then they commit a murder, there's no way to trace it back that he
Now you
bought that
can.
weapon. Oh, you can.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's different now. Now if you talk about that's traditional way. If you're talking about these ghost guns, right? I don't know if you know what a ghost gun is. It's untraceable guns where you can make them through 3D printers, or you
Oh, I've
can make
seen
them
the
through
documentaries.
and make them through parts. Well, that's a big problem. That's a
Yeah, I
big
can
problem.
imagine.
That's a big.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, technology is good, but it also can be used for bad. And
Yeah.
and you see a lot of people. The cartels are getting really good at that. They're good at bringing people in and will order the parts, especially Americans who are gunsmiths, and bringing them in over the border, and then let them start putting the guns together untraceable. So that way, because we have agents in Mexico, and part of the jobs we do is any recovered weapons to try to trace it to see where it came from. But if you don't have those numbers, those serial numbers, well, how can you trace it?
Of course. Yeah.
Untraceables, right? Untraceable.
So
Scary
it's
times, man.
getting harder.
21st
Getting
century.
harder.
Yeah, scary times. It's just only getting worse and tougher. So he was a high school teacher. Went back to the story, and we popped him. And again, he got a little bit of time, I think probation, what have you, but he cooperates. And I keep on going higher and higher to a FFL, which is a federal firearms licensee. This is someone who has a public trust, who has a license issued by ATF, right, to sell guns legally, right? But you got to do the paperwork, right? You got to keep the paper. You got to do the background checks. You got all the things that come responsible as a gun owner of a gun shop, right? And he wasn't doing that. He wasn't doing that. I met with him, and I told my backstory, and we started talking, and he told me how he circumvents the system. He uses his license to buy from wholesalers. He gets it at a discount, right? But he doesn't put it in the A&D book, acquisition disposition book, which is supposed to, where it came from. He says, no, I leave that out. So ATF, when they come in to look at my books, they have no idea my true inventory. And I'll sell it to you
Right.
what they call off paper. Oh, and I'm recording all this. And so we'll keep on talking.
Yeah. So are you wearing a wire when you're doing this sort of
Yeah, you
stuff?
have recorders. Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of recorders and stuff. And like I said, I want to make it so the jury, it goes to trial. But most of my cases, very few went to trial because the evidence is so overwhelming, they pled guilty. In the federal system of the United States, 90% plus plead guilty because the cases are overwhelming and they want to cooperate. So they get some consideration for the cooperation. That's what a lot of them want to do. That's how the American system is over here. So he he gets popped. He sells me the guns and everything else after a few months investigation and talking, and he loses his license, which was satisfying. He does a few years, right? He's an older guy. So I dealt with a variety of people. A guy in his mid-20s, someone who's a teacher in high school, and an older man in his mid-50s, I think 60s, and licensee, all from different parts of walks of life, but all has something in common. They like to make money selling guns.
Yeah.
So you can't really, say, oh, this is a typical firearms trafficker. Do you ask me what's a typical firearms trafficker? Man, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
It could be anybody. Anybody, knows
Even
about guns.
like organized crime and stuff like that. Did you ever come across those sorts of guys?
Yeah, we worked a lot of different cases, and I also wrote about it. Gang members. I did a lengthy case, about 2.5 years, on the Valentine Bloods, which is probably one of the most violent groups in Pasco County at the time, working with the sheriff's office and the police department out there in that area, Newport Richey. And it takes a lot of work. You have informants, you got to work cases, surveillance, and it's satisfying when you can dismantle a group like that, which is involving shootings and drug trafficking, weapons and all that, and all kind of guns, because they really make an impact in the community. And that's satisfying. And those kind of groups are dangerous. Unfortunately, it's a culture. One thing I've seen, and I've written about in my books and everything else, it seems like the gangs and the cartels are still thriving in America, while the mafia is pretty much, I think, pretty much done. Italian mafia in America,
Yeah.
and the biker groups are also suffering a lot. But these other groups are getting stronger and thriving because the culture is just passed from generation to generation, and also the corruption is so immense in Mexico. Well, we don't have an equal partner in the war on
Mm.
drugs. It's just the corruption in Mexico is enormous. Not just Mexico. I have to be honest with you. Mexico, Central America, and South America. When you have Nicolas Maduro, which is indicted narco terrorist under the Trump administration, Maduro was indicted. He took over from Chavez. He said he was a communist, but man, he likes the money he makes from selling drugs. That's for sure. They live well. They talk from both ends. And
Yeah.
when you have that kind of massive corruption in this hemisphere, and they don't care. I mean, if you look at Lopez Obrador, the president of Mexico, he had a famous interview in 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, maybe a month now, where he's saying that, well, if America wants us to enforce more of what's going on the border on our end, well, they need to pay us more. That's
Oh.
like that's a bribe right there, a shakedown. It's like you
Yeah.
don't pay us enough. His mentality in Mexico has been hugs for thugs. Where you think that's the Americans' problem, that's the Canadians' problems, that's a European problem. Where they can't stop their people from consuming drugs, or you know what? It's a business. They see it, but they don't like the guns coming down with the violence. They want us to enforce our side, but they're not really doing a good job on theirs. So I write about that. I write about the cartels. I write about politics. I write about the failures also with some of the problems we have with the Biden administration. Open policy, open borders. That's a big
Mm-hmm.
problem in this country. We need to finish the wall. We need to make sure mass deportations for those coming illegally. Because those who come legally, it's not fair if you wait in line to come to the United States legally with you apply to become a resident, while the people who try to sneak through, and that's just wrong. That's wrong
Yeah.
in all
Yeah.
different counts. So,
Same issue here in the UK as well at the moment.
oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to be
Where do
quite
they come from?
widespread.
How are they coming illegally from the UK?
Usually across through France,
Oh, okay.
across the channel and stuff.
Through the channel.
In like trucks, boats. There's a thing called the migrant crossing, and they're just coming across, in droves, just boats after boats, and a lot of them, unfortunately, like die as well. Accidents out in the sea and stuff like that.
Yeah, we see that.
And it's quite devastating. But I mean, if you're coming from a war-torn country and you're genuinely just trying to find a better life, then there's kind of no problem. But the majority of them are involved with gangs and the Albanians, and it's become a big problem in the UK.
Yeah, you don't want organized crime. That's for sure. You don't want more headaches, more mafia, more groups involved. That's just bad. And the cartels are thriving with that too. See, they're involved in a lot of things. Even if we would stop, the war on drugs, people stop using. I say what they need a lot is people getting treatment, rehabilitation. We're trying to get that better because people have to get their lives together because it doesn't end. A lot of these groups want to see America and Europe and Canada, fall like a rotten apple from within.
Yep.
The other generations get consumed with drugs because fentanyl really destroys people. Fentanyl,
yeah.
drugs. You look online, all that. Legalization, I don't think is the answer. If you go to online, you go YouTube or wherever you go, and you look at, I think British Columbia and Vancouver has legalized drugs, and you see the zombies, the pictures, people just falling on the streets using drugs and all that. You can't just, you got to give them the help, but just legalizing completely, I think is a big mistake.
Yeah.
It just destroys people in drugs. I know in Virginia and a lot of parts, like in Florida and throughout the U.S., marijuana, I'm not sure about the UK, has been legalized for medical use, and in some places, small amount for recreational use. Marijuana,
Yeah.
not cocaine, not heroin, not fentanyl, nothing like that. Is weed legal in the UK?
No, it's not.
No.
No, I think you can
No.
obtain like a medical prescription somehow,
medical.
but I think they don't make it easy for people. And I mean, that's a funny thing as well, because I've been seeing listening to a lot of podcasts, and apparently it's becoming a big problem, especially in the States, because it's not like the regular weed. People are smoking like these concentrates. It's like 90 to 100% THC.
Yeah.
And you've got these young kids now that are going not from the traditional pot from back in the day, but they're going to this super strong stuff, and they're getting all kinds of problems, and it's caused a massive influx of mental health and psychosis and stuff, which the younger kids maybe watching this will disagree with, but it's become a problem, definitely.
Yeah, some of the you can do it without getting high and get the medical benefits of marijuana. They have pill form and everything else, but no, the kids they want to get high,
Yeah.
and the combination of the stronger THC, like you're saying, with the alcohol, it is having a really bad effects with a lot of people, a lot of mental health issues, and you're seeing with the youth in college because we didn't have that kind of issue when I was going to college. It never really was my thing. Obviously, I like to have a good time and everything else, but obviously I was drug tested in college a lot playing sports, and I never liked smoking a lot. That just wasn't something I liked, wasn't what I was involved in. But some kids, man, they just all into this, and I think it ruins their lives with a combination of alcohol with that. That's a bad combination. That's just a bad combo. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
tough to see that, and then you add all the other heavy drugs in the mix. That they say, oh, let me try some coke, or let me do this, and and they start popping the pills, and mixing with alcohol. That's all just bad news. That's a recipe for a disaster. That's
Yeah.
a recipe for disaster. Try to stay away from that stuff. Those who are watching, and get yourself clean and sober. I mean, have a good time when you can, but it's a way, and you hate to see it, and that's what these horrible organizations, cartels, thrive on: the weakness of people, and they're trying to exploit their addiction, destroy their lives, and it has a ripple effect in our country and our work ethic too. And I think you probably have the same issues there because they don't care because maybe in their country it's expensive, and a lot of
Hmm.
people here don't use it, so they say, hey, that's their problem. And we have the massive amount of money, the carrot or the stick. One thing that's different between the cartels and the mafia, with the mafia, when they come after somebody, it's for a purpose, right? You
Yeah.
wronged us. It's business related. When you're dealing with these gangs and the cartels, it's sometimes they like to terrorize people. They're very bloodthirsty. And you hear the horrible stories when they say, hey, you know what? Like Zetas, for example, they were a horrible military group that split off from the Gulf Cartel. And they really enjoyed, killing and videotaping and putting. You can look all this stuff up online. You can see it all. So let's hijack this bus here. Let's take it back to the ranch, and let's do House of Horrors like we did from the Roman Coliseum. And I said, okay, first round, we're going to give this guy a hammer and this guy a bat, and let's see who survives the first round. And then we'll take
Wow.
it to a different level. And then the winner at the end gets a position as a Sicario killer for the Zeta. So one day you're in the bus, next thing you're killing your fellow, mates in the bus, and then you're working for the Zetas.
Mm. I heard you say on
Crazy.
the previous podcast that I listened to that it is also like a form of terrorism as well, what some
Yeah,
of these
yeah. You're
groups are
terrorizing
doing.
people, right? Domestic. They're very. Some of these
Yeah.
guys, they become psychopaths.
Mm.
The same way 14-year you desensitize people. You kill early. You teach how to kill early. It's okay to kill early. It means nothing to kill early, and that's how you're successful. El Chapo Guzman said he was killing early himself, and he was interviewed by Sean. It's unbelievable. I don't know if you saw the interview with Sean Penn in the Sinaloa Mountains with
No.
Kate Del Castillo. Now he after escapes once. Now he escapes twice, but the third time he's on the run there. It's a shame that the Mexican government cannot keep their guys incarcerated, and the U.S.
Mm.
has to pick up the tab, put them in the supermax, have the trial, all the expense on our dollar, right, and then and keep this guy now for life on our dime. That's shameful.
Yeah.
And it's case after case after case after case, and we have to do it because these guys can't do it because they're so corrupt the system. So no, we don't have an equal partner in the war on drugs.
No.
It's unbelievable. Legalization. People say, why not legalize it? For those reasons I said earlier, I don't think that's a good deal because look at British Columbia right now. Look at Vancouver when they legalize in Vancouver. It is awful to see the video. People all over the street collapse. It's like watching zombies everywhere. And Vancouver, I heard, was a nice city before. I've never been there, but images before and after, I sure want to be there now. That's for sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
So
I believe is it the MS-13 that's pretty much controlling the
yeah,
system in America?
the MS-13 is a violent street gang. They started here in the U.S. from Salvadorian immigrants, and they were deported. This is one of the things where you want to get rid of the bad apples, but the country you go down back to, Salvador, Honduras, they're very corrupt, very weak police state. So these guys got together and thrived, and really, really made it even bigger and stronger. And yeah, they don't care. And if you go after them, it's not uncommon for them in Honduras. They did a few years back where, oh, you want to try to make an example of us? Again, they pull over a bus full of women and children, and they go out and execute these kids, these poor children and women, screaming and
Wow.
yelling because they can't. And they want to make, you want to try to do things? This is what we're going to do. So, MS-13 is, it's part of their cult like mentality where not only do they get involved in these things, but they also are very bloodthirsty. and they like to have a body count, and they want to see who's a bigger killer. Oh, this guy has 8. I'm going to do 10, and it doesn't have to have any purpose like the mafia. It's just about getting a body count. So hey, there's a couple in the car, let's kill them because we can, and they're there in their opportunity. In L.A. a few years ago, there was a couple, and I said that one because they were hacked up in a federal park with machetes.
Wow.
Awful.
And that's just to make a statement as well.
That's to make a statement, basically. And sometimes guys go on road rages. There was a famous case out of San Francisco. A Mr. Steen guy was in a road rage because the father and son were parked in a certain way where he couldn't pass them, and the road. He got out of the car and capped them both.
Wow. It's brutal.
So violence everywhere. It's brutal. Fortunately, when I have a country of our size, 340 million, we have just think just 1% of that. You still have a lot of problems. The numbers are higher. We have to incarcerate a lot because of the culture, and on top of that, it's easy access to weapons. So you got psychopaths, people with mental health issues, and on top of that, easy access to weapons. That's a recipe for disaster. And maybe that's why we also have a lot of mass shootings too in the United States.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems to be a bit of a problem, doesn't it?
Yeah,
especially with the assault rifles and stuff.
Yeah, mass shootings are a big problem. My take on this, and I'm a very pro Second Amendment, which is we protect the right to bear arms, with firearms and everything else, is the bad guys don't respect the laws at all. You have all these gun-free zones, right? Allegedly, right? You think they're going to say, oh, hey, it's a gun-free zone. I'm not allowed to carry my gun here. I better turn around and walk home.
Yeah.
No, they don't care. They don't care.
And I know when I used to do the radio stuff, statistically, you see that there's more violent crime in the states that have stricter gun laws.
Yes.
Statistically.
Yes.
And I've got family in Indiana. And
you do?
It's like, and it's concealed carry state, I think. So, and they've basically explained that, if a mass shooting was about to happen, then members of the public could quickly stop it. Whereas if you're
that's the idea, right? A good guy with a gun hopefully can stop a bad guy with a gun, but nobody with a gun can't stop a bad guy with a gun, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You're getting slaughtered, and you're getting slaughtered. It's awful, awful, awful. You look at the scene. I don't know if you remember Steve Paddock in Las Vegas, the worst mass shooter in U.S. history a few years ago.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He was set up like a sniper style, right? But this is such a complicated story, and I talk about this in my book, the worst mass shooting in U.S. history, and how we can stop them happening again. He had mental health issues. He had other stuff going on, but he was at a very nice hotel up there, and there was a farm. And I have the name of the hotel. I think it was it escapes me my name right now. It's in the book. And he was a sweet. He was a heavy player, so they comped him a nice room. But he helped the hotel staff because he had all the guns. So you don't know if you know this. They don't X-ray your bags going to hotels, right?
I mean, I've seen the CCTV footage of them just bringing them in, and
they helped him. They helped him.
Yeah.
He had 2 suites. And he took him 3 days to go back and forth from his home. He wasn't too far. Back and forth in Las Vegas. Back and forth. And they helped him load it up. And then he was set up his like a sniper style with all these weapons, 30 plus weapons, right? He even had bump stocks in him to help him shoot fully automatic. And he killed 50 plus people. 50 plus people.
Just indiscriminately shooting into the crowds. And
they were there to have a good time, enjoy life. And so many more got injured out there. Awful, awful, awful. Police responded quickly on that one, which was good, and he committed suicide. He had a handgun. He committed suicide. And that picture's out there too, and that was leaked out there. People want to see that too on Steve Paddock, the worst mass shooter. But I think you have to act quickly. That was a good one in some sense. The police responded quickly, local authorities. A bad one would be Uvalde, Texas. What happened there at elementary school, where all these kids were killed while the police stayed outside, right? And the parents are even trying to get in, knowing which classroom is shooting on, and they're arresting the parents, they're tasing the parents, and they're spreading the parents while the police sitting back. And one teacher was interviewed later who survived. One of the few teachers said he was shot under the table, he couldn't move, he was kind of like paralyzed, and was watching his kids being executed. And he said he heard them outside the classroom, and they did nothing. They did nothing. That's not the way to do it. I did active shooter training. Once they start opening up, you got to go in there. You got to try to save them out there, but wait 70 minutes and treat it like a barricade situation where the kids are bleeding out. And even one of the kids used a teacher's phone to call and said, "We need help. We're getting shot in here." And they stayed outside. It took a Borak team from Border Patrol to go in there, who was miles away, responded, who was like a SWAT team, to finally go in there and neutralize the threat and kill this guy.
Wow, it's awful. I mean, I
80
do listen to a
minutes.
lot of true crime stuff, and I can understand that sometimes people are a victim of circumstance, but I can't get my head around the psychology of what would possess somebody to go and shoot a load of children or innocent people in general.
It's awful. It's awful. We get quite a few of those in this country, and I wrote a book about that. And the mindset is, I think the trend is they never got the help they needed.
Yeah. We've had a couple of mass shootings here in the UK. One probably quite famous was, I think, in the late 80s. There was a guy down in the south, I think London kind of area. He went crazy with an AK-47, killed about 19 people, and then assault rifles were banned. And then about 5 or 6 years later, up in Lockerbie, Scotland, there was a guy that went crazy with 2 handguns, shot loads of kids in schools, and then that led to them, banning handguns in this country. I mean, currently people can get shotguns and hunting rifles with very strict checks, and they have to go through tests and get licenses and stuff.
Yeah.
But then we did have like a cab driver that went crazy a decade ago with a shotgun, and then they were talking of
shotgun. So yeah,
banning those too. But
it's not I hate when they demonize the weapon. It's not the weapon. The weapon is just an object, because most people, law-abiding citizens, have weapons, and they treat it. It's that 1% that does the bad things. You have to address what happened there, the mental health crisis. So my solutions were, and what can help prevent the numbers. You're always going to have, some people dying, but to have the huge numbers, if you can, especially at schools, to have, after 9/11, I'm going to change here. After 9/11, what they did is the pilots could be armed in the cockpit if they wanted to, right? They can be trained in the cockpit. That way they have a gun in case there's no air marshal. Like, as a federal agent, I was cross-designated that I would notify the pilot, and I said, I have my weapon on me. In case you need me, let me know on the flights. So it's a force multiplier for the air marshals, for federal agents, to also be armed on the plane when flying. So that would help. After, a lot of things happen after 9/11. So a lot of pilots wanted it because they were prior military, gun enthusiasts, or they want to do the training, and they want to at least be prepared to address a terrorist that are trying to take over the plane, right?
Of course. Yeah.
So maybe a lot of teachers, right, who have prior training, right, military, law enforcement, or gun enthusiasts, they also said, you know what, we should have, guns somewhere secure in the classroom where at least we can fight back and not be slaughtered, right, and stuff like that. So that's one solution. I said, teachers who want to also have a resource. Some counties can have resource officers, or maybe there should be a federal force that can provide protection for schools, right? Or maybe you have to hunker down with more protection at one way in, one way out, making it harder for the people to come into these places. Hunker the schools down, make it harder for them to come in. Not easy access anywhere you want and open up. So there's a lot of things you can do to try and minimize it, at least at the schools. When you look at theaters, shopping, because it happens everywhere, theaters, shopping centers, or what have you, then you need more trained professionals, either security that's armed, or you need police officers at these locations. If I had a business, I want to make sure my patrons were protected, right? Some of them don't care. They don't want you armed, and they offer no protection. Man, that's bad news.
Of course, yeah.
These guys are going to come in. You say they're going to come in. It's awful, awful. And what you want is to have the police to do their job too, because you don't want them waiting outside like Uvalde, Texas, or what happened in Parkland with the high school, where you had a resource officer who was there, right? And the kids are getting slaughtered, and teachers are trying their best to try and save the kids, and they're getting shot. And this guy has an assault rifle, and the guy stay outside, and you need to go in. I mean, at least get their attention, do something. If you have one or two of you, you have your weapons. These kids have nothing. You got to do something. You can't stay outside. I don't know where the shots are being fired, or go inside and at least render some aid to those who have been shot. Do something. Don't just wait outside and let them die out there like that. So we've had some bad incidents there where people are very upset with what happened in there. And, it's, I think the UK has a population of 40 million?
I think it's 60 something. Yep.
Yeah. So, maybe those things might work there, but 340 million, it's, especially if you live, and I always say people, especially if you're at home, you should have some home defense, if you're especially in a more rural area, because if you expect the police to come and save you when you have a home invader in your house, it's going to take them at least 20, 30 minutes to get there, right? It's going to be an investigation after the fact.
the self-defense laws here in the UK are quite a joke, really.
Oh,
You're
really?
not allowed to possess any kind of weapon if it's for self-defense. So if you went to
What?
apply for like a shotgun license just for home invaders, and you told the police officer who visits your home to get the license, oh, I want it for self-protection. No, you're not allowed it. That's it. It's a crime. It's
It's a
crazy.
crime?
Yeah. Even if you're found to have any kind of weapon, and your reason for having it is for self-defense, then that's a crime.
That's a
So
crime.
it kind of gives the gangs and the home invaders the green light, really, because they can still get the weapons, and
Of
they
course.
do.
That's what I've been saying. My book's all about that. I'm
Mm,
very about that. I'm glad. But it's amazing how many people, and I'm use the term the blue states, don't see it that way. The liberals don't see
mm,
it that way, right? They think gun is bad, and if you have gun free zones, I mean the bad guys, no, they're still going to come. Some people do. I mean, some people don't like guns. All depends on the individual. Like I said, I like collecting weapons. Plus, I have good weapons for home defense from handguns, rifles, shotguns, and keep it in sometimes in different rooms too, secure, because nothing's worse, you know. And don't put it. And I always give. I wrote an article about this because not only write books but also write articles that get published in different places. And my expertise, I said, you want to be able common sense things you can do to protect your house and your family. I'm just going to put this out there. Maybe it also applies to you guys out there where you can do this too. Is try to have your house or wherever you live lit well. Don't keep it dark, right? Don't have it give an opportunity to be shadowy going around if you can. If you can, I know it's expensive. Try to have a camera, an alarm system, right? I know if you can afford that, at least put the signs out that you do have one. This is the war of psychology you got to play with these criminals, right? Make it hard. Make them think twice and not to hit this house or this place because, oh, this might have an alarm. Maybe put some fake cameras up. They don't have to be wired, but put the cameras up to maybe think, oh, maybe I'm being watched. I got to be careful. Light everything up around you, right? Maybe you have to put signs. I like to do this. Bad dog.
yeah.
Bad dog everywhere, right? Make them think, oh man, this dog is really quiet. I got to be careful here. And this is part of the game. Maybe put like a big bowl out, right? And see how big it is. And all these things you got to play with it. That way he's saying, you know what? And don't, and please lock your doors. Some people like to keep the thing, oh, I can still sleep at night. My door's unlocked, windows open, everything quiet and dark. No, that's a recipe for being disaster. That's a disaster right there. And you see the horror stories happen all the time where these guys take advantage. And serial killers, guess what? They look for that too. I know you guys have a few, and we've had quite a few in America. You think of course, Jack the Ripper, and you think of the time H.H. Holmes and other ones, but we've had quite a few in America, and what they talk about, like the Bundys and the Dahmers and the Gacy's and all these big names, is they take advantage. Ramirez, he was a night stalker. They take advantage of homes of people who they leave stuff open. You make it easy for them. They're going to watch you. They're going to stalk you. They're going to see your patterns, and they're coming in. So that's the unfortunate reality we live in.
Yeah, it's quite scary. It's a scary world, really, when you're not allowed to protect yourself.
No, I can't believe I couldn't. I would never live in a blue state. America is divided by red and blue states, and it's unfortunate. But I've lived in Florida my whole life. I would never live in California because I was born there, but I wouldn't live there because of how Gavin Newsom. And I think it's important not to restrict people. And the homeless population is out of control.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole different topic there. That's just insane what's going on there. They need to get that in order. It's a health issue there. It's a mental health problem. You just can't have people living on the streets. And when I went to D.C., working headquarters, I took the train and Union Station. I've never seen so many homeless people around there. To me, it's just sickening. And it's just a health crisis. You cannot have people countries should not have their citizens live like that. We have to have a solution for that. But living on the street is not a solution. That doesn't work. And they're the same kind of crazy sometimes. They'll do stuff. And you see in New York all the time. They push people in front of the train, right? They lose their minds and they do awful things. I would hate to go. I have been on the train before, the subway in New York City, but they're so strict and they can't carry anything. And there's so many bad people out on the trains. That's another horrible recipe there. I wouldn't want to be on the train. I'll take an Uber. I'll be honest, man.
Yeah.
I'm not taking the train anymore. But now that I'm retired, before I could carry, so I didn't care. When I'm retired, when I'm law enforcement, I can go anywhere with my gun, right? Even have a concealed weapons permit. This is how crazy DC, New York, and you can't carry. Period. Right. Why would I want to put myself in that situation?
What is it? is it Chicago? It's like the murder capital of the
Chicago
states.
has
Is that
quite a
still
few.
true?
Chicago
And
has quite a
what's
few
the
too.
gun laws like in Chicago?
Yeah, same thing.
Same thing.
The
Right.
same thing. A blue state, right? Look at all the blue states: New York, Chicago. You see a lot in the Northeast, parts of the Midwest, the West Coast. Some people call it the left coast. California, Oregon,
Everybody's leaving.
Washington. Yeah, so it's places I like. Texas. I like the laws, gun laws in Texas, Florida, the South, parts of the Midwest. Virginia has become more red now, which is good. Governor Youngkin. So it depends. If you believe in your right to protect yourself and everything else. See, knowing all this now, it's like I like to visit, but I couldn't live anywhere in Europe where you can't protect yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I can
That's
imagine.
awful. That is
Yeah, it
awful.
is.
Because these guys and they're coming in, they think you have something they want. They'll take no prisoners.
Mm. I think
And-
I'm sure it was a Florida sheriff or some kind of chief of police or something that I heard recently. And they were saying that it's, if somebody breaks into your home, we want you to kill them. You'd be doing us a favor. And I was like, whoa.
That's Sheriff, I think it's Sheriff Grady out of Polk County. Yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah,
Sheriff Grady. Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, people in the UK are scared to like beat somebody up if they break into the home. I mean, you can use reasonable force, so they say, but I mean, if you happen to kill them because you're in a state of panic and fearing for your own life, then chances are you're going to be charged with that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very tough case.
We have something called the Castle Doctrine, which we have here, where you can't really leave anywhere. This is your home, right? You're allowed to stay in your home and defend yourself. Now, other places like Florida has stand your ground, in Virginia and Texas, where you don't have to retreat. If someone is coming at you, you're allowed to stand your ground and defend yourself. Other places you have to retreat first. And after a while, then you're able to defend yourself. You have to give yourself a chance to, I don't like any, so you go to these weird places. Yeah. I say, oh no, I got to run first. And then my goodness, awful. That's just me as retired law enforcement. I'm just giving my opinion here.
You have to prove that then in the court, don't you? I should imagine.
Yeah. Oh, if they charge you, that's awful. Man, hopefully they don't charge you, but they do. Can you imagine having to live through that?
Yeah.
You get victimized twice. This is my opinion. You get victimized twice. You almost got victimized by this guy, and then the system victimizes you. You have to justify your actions. That's awful. Yeah. Protecting your family. So that's just, my views, things, and what I've seen. And I'm not happy with any state or any country that doesn't want me to be able to defend me. Responsible. Now, if you're not responsible, I get that. Hold that person accountable. But don't just say, oh, one bad person used this kind of weapon. Now we're going to ban this weapon.
Yeah.
No. Why don't address what happened with that bad person and what issues and where was the ball dropped and what kind of mental health issue this guy have? And who said what about, because it's always someone who said, hey, I don't like this person, how they're acting, social media, they post some really weird stuff, right? They're saying stuff to say, if you see something, say something, right? Report to authorities, move quickly. And how did that person get those weapons? If you got these great gun laws, how do they get all these weapons?
I mean, we've seen that time and time again from serial killers and mass shooters that have had YouTube channels, let's say, and they've been documenting how they feel and how they hate the world, and there's all kinds of like signs there that this guy's not wired up right, he's planning something, and then we'll always see it after the fact. Oh, this is his, his YouTube channel, and this was his manifesto, and this is the sort of stuff he used to say, and and then nobody's picking up on this. It's just
there's a lot of red flags, and when you see it. And some people are scared to get involved, but you need to get involved because it just keeps on happening. We had a shooter in Maine do the same thing. He was a reservist, he was a sergeant, firearms instructor, but he was saying a lot of stuff on the base, making a lot of threats, right? Having a lot of issues. And they have certain red flags laws to be able to take guns away from people who people think are a threat and a problem. The ball fell through the cracks, so to speak. And he committed atrocities. The worst mass shooting in Maine history happened there a few months ago. So there's always issues there. At least he committed suicide. They're going to deal with the trial and all that headache. Most of these guys, when confronted by law enforcement, do. All right. So the key is to get there quickly, confront this person, so they stop the shooting, and maybe they shoot themselves, or they can stop the threat, neutralize the threat at least. So those are some of the things we deal with in the United States. But it's still it's a big country, plenty to see. Just be careful, common sense. Like anything, if you go to London, you need common sense, right? You go to Paris, before the Olympics, common sense. Let's see how the Olympics goes. I mean, a lot of people are nervous. I'll be there before the Olympics. People are thinking, and the French are not the most. They've had some horrific attacks also by terrorism.
Yeah.
Remember the one because the guy who did political cartoons, and they didn't like
Charlie
it.
Hebdo.
Yeah, and they went after. What a massacre! What a massacre is out there. And France is another country which they have strict gun laws, but the terrorists have all the guns they want, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, man. Not for me. At least I want to go out fighting.
Yeah. Definitely. We're hoping ourselves, me and my family, to leave the UK at some point in the future. Once we're in a better position. Yeah, I'd really like to go and live in Indiana or around there. Got
in
a
the
lot
Midwest?
of family out there, so yeah.
Nice. Well, good for you, man. Hopefully you can. The weather gets a little cold, but I mean, you're used to it there in Manchester too, right?
Yeah.
Virginia gets cold. I mean, I don't know how cold. You get a lot of snow in Manchester?
No, not really. No. Okay. I mean, you seem to have periods where every so many years you'll get a bad snow, and then you don't really get any. But it's England's just grey, very grey. I've got a good friend from Texas, actually, who's lived over here now about 15 years. And when he first got off the plane, he couldn't believe how grey it was. And then he woke up the next day, it's grey again, and coming from Texas, where it's just sunshine and blue skies, it could be quite depressing. So I think a lot of people in the UK suffer from seasonal affective disorder. So they kind of get depressed, and then rarely when the sun comes out, you can see everybody's happy and the mood changes. And
it's like Seattle. They say Seattle the same way.
Is it?
Yeah, they say the same thing. People, it's very cloudy weather and everything else. And Virginia, it's nice weather. I mean, we do get some snow. We had about 1.5 feet a few years ago. That was intense. We lost power for a week. It was so bad. And so this story here, at I-95, a major thoroughfare that goes from New York City to Miami, and parts right there in the county I was in Virginia was shut down because of massive snow, and people couldn't leave their cars for over a day.
Wow.
Luckily, no one died, but that's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
But the Midwest does get a lot more than we do. So they do get a little more. But hey, like anything else in the summertime. But when I have visited London, I visited in the summer, and it seems like the weather's nice in the summertime.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the further down south you go in the UK, it is a little bit nicer, to be honest.
Okay.
Up here in the north, it's it can be kind of grim.
Grim weather, gotcha. It was nice in London time there, so I did enjoy that weather there. But like anything else, folks, going back, common sense, and if you can be armed, there's a lot of things you can do that can protect yourself at home, and just make it more difficult for these guys to come in there, because every city you go to, wherever you go, there's crime. Unfortunately, and that's a reality. We live in the 21st century world, and it's been like that for generations, unfortunately.
Yeah. So did you ever have any involvement with the mob or any kind of operations against the
Italian mafia? Not the Italian mafia, no. But I did organized crime with you do biker cases, or you work with like I said, street gangs, or you work one thing is like I said, I always said, deal with home invaders, guys who are looking to do like an armed robbery, obviously a cocaine stash house, and dealing with those guys and their mindset. Imagine the kind of person that says, I'm willing to do a home invasion of a place protected by armed guys, armed guards working for the cartels to protect a load and try to take it away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Those are intense individuals. Those are bad dudes. And those are kind of dudes who will also come to your house. Not just yours, but anybody else. They take no prisoner mentality. So I did those kind of cases also. And those were intense. And in my book, I go in detail. So if you like what I'm hearing here, you can read ATF Undercover. And if you don't like reading books, my books are also an Audible. So,
cool.
Yeah, I'd had a professional voice actor help me with them. Shout out to Sean Milo. And I'm doing now one with Rick Fonts on Tyrants and Killers. ATF Undercover is about maybe 2-hour listen. And then the one I did about the most dangerous crime syndicates of our time, it's just a short 8 hours. And Tyrants and Killers are going to be about 8 hours also. And that should be coming out in about a month or so. So wow. I'm hoping to get more books. And I also did books on, like I said, from, true crime. If you like serial killers, I did an interesting book on psycho killers, which is an interesting read there where you can look at it. And it's not just the U.S., but internationally too. So since you guys are in UK, obviously Jack the Ripper and other comparisons to obviously multiple Jack the Rippers and copycats. It seemed like it was the same guy who started early in fall 1888, and the ones the following year seems like a little different. And I talk about that, and also about H.H. Holmes, and people thinking maybe he was also Jack the Ripper. Two of them doctors that became infamous serial killers, right?
Wow.
Chicago, yeah, the famous murder castle where he set up his hotel, allegedly, where he could kill his patrons in there and make them disappear with different contraptions and trap doors and torture chambers and everything else.
Wow. Well, so
1892. Yeah.
I guess you're quite well astute in psychology, criminal psychology. And
it's interesting. You read enough of this, you start piecing it together and say, man, this is a common practice. Something wasn't right. Either they're born that way or they're made that way, or maybe a combination of both.
Trauma or some experience.
Something triggered them bad, abuse, and they want to punish those. They were punished in life, and now they want to inflict that punishment on others. And that's what my trend. I was reading and noticing of that. I need something, but when I started researching and writing, I said, man, you see a pattern developing here with these guys. Dr. Shipman, since you're in the UK,
yeah,
the good doctor, the angel of death himself, right?
Not too far from Manchester. Well, in Manchester, actually, yeah.
His mother died a certain way that he didn't like, right? His older ladies, and he's just giving them the morphine too, and then he starts turning over all their wealth to him, right? And then he's able to rig the death certificates, and then a taxi driver picks up the pattern and said, "Hey man, every time I'm taking these ladies to see this doctor, Dr. Shipman, they don't make it back." Yeah, and it was a pattern of that. And,
did you hear about the nurse recently in the UK? Yeah, she was killing all the babies and stuff.
People get ideas in their head, and they think, all right, this one doesn't have Dr. Death, also Dr. Kevorkian, out of Michigan, right? But he was a little different because he wouldn't actually inject them. He would set you up, right? Because you're sick, right? And he said, all right, now you're the one, and you say 6 minutes, now you're the one who's going to inject yourself. So, but then eventually.
Okay. Wow. No way.
Unreal, man. Unreal.
Yeah.
But Dr. Shipman hung himself. He escaped justice. He escaped justice. He hung himself. Yeah.
The easy way out.
He took the easy way out, and whatever reasons, maybe he had issue with, I think, something going on with his wealth he had, and I don't know. I write about it in my book there. So quite a few people around the world. The Russians have had their fair share. The Europeans, Germans have had their fair share. Here in the U.S., we've had quite a few. And even in South America, the monster Pedro Lopez, who could be the most prolific serial killer of all time, Pedro Lopez, the monster of the Andes himself. Right. And you know what he used to kill these indigenous children and women? No. His bare hands.
Really?
He liked to suffocate them and look at his last breath while he suffocated them. In Ecuador, he was arrested for this. And the most time you can kill 100 people. But no matter the most time you get, it's one of those countries you only get 15 years. No matter what you do, 15 years is the most time you get. So he got out, killing, God knows how many kids he killed and whatever, 300 plus, I think they had it. He gets deported. And I'm kind of shortening the story here. I've got more details in my book, Psycho Killers, about him. And I didn't know much about him either. He gets deported back to Colombia, and the Colombians don't have much on him. So they let him go. And some people think he might still be alive today. He's still the most prolific serial killer of our time, might still be alive today.
Really?
300 plus.
It makes you wonder why they can have laws like that, like maximum, like you say, 15 years.
Well, every country, man, you scratch your head and it's like, man, that's all the time someone like this guy, he should get life. But look at the guy from Norway, right? Who killed all those kids, right? At that summer camp, right? Horrible, almost close to 100. And he laughs at the system. He's crazy as hell. And he's complaining because he can't get his Wi-Fi access. And what?
Wow.
What? What kind of country? What? That guy should have been executed. Done.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that as well. Do you think that for people like that, the death penalty should be a given? Or do you think that's too easy for them? Or what do you think? I
like that Bundy was executed. Ted Bundy in Florida. Old Sparky. Old Sparky's had some good ones in Florida. And he's up there. They have this guy... you look at Old Sparky. That's an electric chair. If you don't know what Old Sparky is, that's it. They don't have that anymore. They stopped doing electrocution deaths. Now is lethal injection. And many states are going to lethal injection. I'm not sure. The UK doesn't have that, right?
No, unfortunately not. It should do, definitely, for those high profile killers and stuff.
Mm.
When you're
Imagine that.
100% certain that they committed the crime and there's clear evidence, then yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's a drain on
why
the
keep them?
resources. Yeah.
Why keep them forever? And you have to fund them. I mean, that's just unbelievable. It's a huge burden. But so again, the blue states, they'll keep them. The red states,
Mm,
Texas, Florida, Virginia, the South, no, done. You get your appeal process. You exhausted all your appeals. You commit this atrocity, these horrible murders. Goodbye.
yeah.
That's the way it should be. Lethal injection. Yeah, before they used to be all different ways. Before they went to lethal injection, there used to be hangings. There used to be execution by shooting. Yeah, of course, Zangara was another one. Yeah, in Florida, they've had quite a few murderers, serial killers, and they get executed.
Mm. Because I suppose from the criminal's mindset is that I can do whatever I want and I'm just going to be put in a cell. Nothing's going to happen to me. I mean, they might get beat up in prison or whatever, but the state can't kill them. And I think that if they had that mindset, they'd think twice before they went. And
I agree. I imagine that's a big problem in Europe. I think a lot of European countries are the same boat. They don't have a death penalty, and that's what that one guy, man, he's awful. The guy we're talking about, I can't remember his name right now, out of Norway, but that guy's awful. He's mocking the system.
Breivik or something. Yeah,
it's awful, awful. Those poor kids suffered the way he executed them, and they went there to a nice camp to enjoy their time. They never had a chance to enjoy their lives. He snuffed it out of them, and the way he's acting, he should have no life at all.
No, I agree.
Another case, I did a book on infamous LA murders. And since we're talking about this topic here, death of O.J. Simpson recently, right?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Remember O.J. just passed away. He had cancer.
I listened to a show recently. I think they were saying that there was possibly somebody else involved with that.
But yeah, there's always theory, but I don't see that. I see O.J. Sure. He had an obsession with his ex-wife, and he was a very jealous guy. And everything that I researched and looked at, he looked at the videos and his actions afterwards indicates that he's the only guy. Ron Goldman, they weren't lovers. Ron Goldman happened to be the waiter at the restaurant. She had left her glasses behind. He was returning them and happens to catch OJ in the act. Tries to do the right thing, and he gets hacked up, right? He goes in a rage. They said blood was everywhere, right? In the little outside the apartment complex there in Brentwood. Awful. And then he disappears like nothing. He has the cut in his finger. He goes, I think everybody remembers the slow chase on the Bronco with LAPD. He's putting the gun to his head, and his guy. I mean, all the indications are there. But what I said, and I wrote about this, is if it wasn't for Rodney King and the riots 2 years earlier, I think this was jury nullification. Remember, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit by Cochran, right? Yeah. One of his attorneys. They had the dream team out there. The gloves, I mean, why would they have him try them on? Obviously, he's covered in blood. It's leather. It's going to shrink. I think that was a bad idea. Hindsight,
yeah, I mean, growing up, I've been under the impression, as sort of common knowledge, that he was guilty.
Yeah.
And there's this big famous case that he got away with it. And then I've heard different reasons that there was issues with the police and the black community, and they didn't want to look bad, and they had to be very clear on the evidence, and maybe some sort of corruption as well. And, he probably had the money to pay people off.
That's a system right there. Two errors happened there. They filed in the wrong area. I think they filed in downtown LA, right? It was still very sensitive after Rodney King.
Yeah.
They had, I think, one was alleged Black Panther member on the jury. Allegedly, when the jury came back, he saluted him with the Black Panther salute, right? And I think OJ knew that he was going to be in a good place right there.
Yeah.
And he did have the money, and he brought in the experts that could tear apart crime scene investigators. If you don't do things right, you can say it's been contaminated. This happened here. They did all the right things to break apart the case, bring enough doubt. The gloves don't fit. You must have quit. The whole 9 yards. And unfortunately, they did. And no one's ever arrested again because they knew OJ killed. He had the motive. He had the opportunity. He had a history of violence. He had domestic issues with her, Nicole Brown, right? He had issues. You've seen the pictures of her. You go back, you see the abuse she's taken. A psychopath, an absolute psychopath. He had the image. Buffalo Bills football player, commentator. In my opinion, murder. He was convicted in the civil trial, though. He was convicted in the civil, but not in the criminal. So, interesting story. And I talk about that there. Infamous LA murders in my book there. quite a
Yeah.
few different ones there. But that's up there because he died. He did get convicted in Las Vegas for trying
Right.
to get back his sports trophies, right?
No way.
That remember that he about 8 years in Las Vegas for that. So there was some justice there. The irony, he did a lot more time for an armed robbery attempt than he did for murdering Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman.
And the thing is with a lot of these cases that it's always after the fact when the person's dead, then, we can talk about it now because there's no libel and stuff. And then new information usually comes out and it's too late, doesn't it?
Yeah. At least maybe the family gets some. He had cancer and he died. And he was in his 70s, but I can tell you one thing: a lot of people didn't shed a tear for him when he died.
No, I can imagine not. No, so is it 80 books you've wrote? Over 80 books
Yeah,
now?
almost 80, right? 80 books.
Wow.
I got some on Audible too. Like I said, I've got quite a few from ATF Undercover, exclusively on Amazon. I know my number one market is the US, but second is the UK. A lot of people like my books in the UK. It's the US, UK, Canada, and then different parts of Europe and India too. Because in English, I like it in India too. So it's pretty cool. Have your books out there, people reading. And then, of course, I also do a lot of shows, podcast shows. So if you like this content here, you can find me all over YouTube, Google me, and you can see all my shows out there, 200 plus, and talk about a lot of cool things. I do a lot of politics too, but I can start about gun control, but I also do true crime. I also talk about my background. I talk about things happening, and I've been writing some screenplays. Hopefully,
cool.
I can get my book made into a TV series. So we're working on that too. I got the PR firm behind me, and I'm also writing a lot of articles for different magazines or books or what have you. So I'm doing a lot of different things. I enjoy it. It's something that's current, passionate about it. I put it out there and talk about it. So I do a lot of that. We'll see if a convicted felon can be president of the United States. That's what I say.
We'll get into that briefly before you go, but I'd say that I reckon that a lot of people within law enforcement learn a lot as well from your books and from your experiences. It's probably
I hope so.
Quite an insight to them as well.
And hopefully people who are not in law enforcement learn a lot too, and like just stuff we talked about, just things you have to do to protect yourself. And I think it's important. People, there's that they have different colors of your mindset when you go out in public. If you're oblivious and you're in your latte world, right, and you just drink your lattes and you have
the smartphone and
if you're in that world and someone comes up and puts a gun to you, what are you gonna do? If you're in that kind of world, you're not gonna do anything, nothing. If you're kind of careful, you look where you're sitting. You're seeing, okay, if I'm sitting in a restaurant, my back to the wall, if I have to leave, exit somewhere, where's the quickest exit I can go out? A movie theater, anywhere. Okay, now you're up there a little more. If you can be armed because you're profession, that's even better. But if you just sit down and you're clueless about everything, it's not gonna be good. When it happens, you're just gonna panic, and nothing good's gonna come out of that.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a scary world we live in, isn't it?
It's unfortunate. It is a reality, but those who want to prepare themselves can't prepare themselves. Those who choose not to, then you deal with the consequences of that. And then with politics here, talking with Trump here, I had an article I just wrote here called "Even a 34 count conviction cannot stop the Trump train." Because people are just so done with Biden. It's just rumbling, stumbling, mumbling. Joe Biden there, and Trump has his flaws. But he's going to do a lot better with inflation. We have that. And probably in UK also, inflation is pretty high over there, I imagine. In the UK, highest it's been in 40 years.
Yeah, the cost of living is just through the roof, like groceries and stuff. Just
it's awful.
Fuel and utilities is crazy.
It's awful.
Yeah.
Awful. We need people. 3 things he has to take care of. Try to rein in inflation again. The open border policy, you got to shut that down. I've already said, since so many people have come in, it's documented, not just from Latin America. They come in from Africa, the Middle East, China. We have already sleeping cells probably in the United States. And unfortunately, because of this, probably another 9/11 is going to happen, unfortunately. It's
What's your kind of views on the possibilities of maybe a civil war as well at some point? Because it seems to be a lot of armed groups and militias and a lot of tension building up.
There's a lot of tension. I don't see a civil war because you see the country, people move all over the country. So you might have people not like each other, but the government's pretty strong, and it would crush any rebellion and secession pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's treasonous behavior. yeah, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution from terrorism, from domestic threats or foreign threats. Not to be, not gonna put up with this. The country went through it once, different times. It's not gonna happen now. So I think
Yeah.
it's interesting with Trump. The other angle is a lot of people think maybe something will happen with him with the election. I don't know. I hope not. It is going to be interesting. But then you
So
add in the mix.
can he
Mhm.
still run then? That he's been, is it
Yeah,
convicted or so I'm hearing?
he still can run. He can
Right.
still run,
No
and
way.
he's leading by. In fact, he's gaining ground big time. The more they indict him or they convict him, the more people think that he's getting railroaded, and this is a political witch hunt.
Right. Okay.
Blue state going after a red Republican, right? New York City, and the comments were made by the AG and the district attorney's office out there. Seem very political. I mean, they have some serious crime they're dealing with, and they're dealing with a paper crime about back 6, 7 years ago with paying hush money to a porn star, Stormy Daniels.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Really? This is what you're going after because he's Trump? You wouldn't go after anybody else for that.
No,
That's
it's
political.
kind of
That's
ridiculous.
wrong. That's wrong. That's that's the things you see in a banana republic, and
Mhm.
we're better than that. And people don't like that. So I see Trump winning.
So it's certainly going to be an interesting 2024
Yeah,
election year,
keep
isn't
an eye.
it?
If you like American politics, I think you like what's going on here.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to touch base again some point in the future
Absolutely,
if you're
Marty.
willing to come back on the show. And
I enjoy it. I enjoy it, and definitely let me know if you're coming to the U.S. Pay a visit. Where to go, where not to go.
yeah, you can be my tour guide.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Definitely. No, it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you. And I know we could just go on for hours and hours and hours with your wealth of knowledge and experience in life, but I don't want you to give too much away. And I would like people to check out the links and go and check out your other content. And of course, your books and your ebooks. And I'm looking forward to the possibilities of your screenwriting. And
Thank you, man.
what happens with that. You'll have to definitely keep me in the loop.
Absolutely, Marty, for sure. Thank you for having me, man. Enjoy the show, and look forward to keep on watching you too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been amazing. Thank you. So, guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget that the podcast is available on all the streaming platforms, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, just to mention a few. Too many to list. And likewise, if you're listening to them and you want the video version, head over to my YouTube, Media Podcast, and you'll find my other types of content there too. I recently met Michael Francis, the ex-Italian mob capo, here at an event in Manchester. And yeah, you can check the video out of that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of this year with the interviews that are coming up. And big thank you to you guys. Wouldn't be possible without your support. And to Ignacio himself for coming on today, being my first guest in the series of remote interviews. And it's been everything I thought it'd be and more.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Definitely come back on soon. Okay, thank you.